EJ Hollen joining us from 24/7 Sports, where he focuses on high school football recruiting. EJ, so your footprint is basically Texas, the Southwest, the Big 12. How does that work?
The majority of my coverage is actually based for the University of Texas. I do, cover a lot of the state and I do travel a lot. I was just in Orlando for a big 7-on-7 tournament. I went out to California, I don't know how many times, been out to Arizona, Oklahoma, Louisiana. So I guess I try to kind of expand my coverage kind of everywhere.
When you look at the landscape of what you cover, and obviously you've got a beat on the entirety of college football recruiting and could probably speak to all five major conferences, who are some of the high risers, the programs that seem to be, from a recruiting standpoint, taking that upward trajectory, and then maybe who's in a bit of a slump? We can look at the recruiting rankings, and obviously we can typically match those up with the national rankings, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, on down the line. But then you've got your aberrations. You've got your outliers like Michigan State and Wisconsin, which seem to outplay their recruiting rankings, and then some other teams, Texas over the past decade, which has underperformed. Just your thoughts about where those trends are.
Texas is definitely a program trending up. Like I said, they are ranked number 3 in the national recruiting rankings, only behind Alabama and Georgia. So, I mean, Tom Herman, again, has done a really great job of recruiting nationally. I think a team that could jump into that top 5 group after National Signing Day is LSU. They still have some big targets left forward. I think a lot of guys are buying into what Ed Orgeron is selling. He's a really kind of players coach. A lot of guys like him. LSU obviously is a competitor in the SEC. I think they're kind of on the rise under Coach O. I think they'll make that leap with the potential targets they have on the board. I think a program that's really trending completely south, if we want to talk about teams that are going downwards, it's USC. I think USC is just kind of a dumpster fire there a little bit with Clay Helton, and he might not be there after this year. Lynn Swann and that kind of athletic department has been under a little bit of fire. And so I think that resulted in one of the more unique storylines that's not just this recruiting cycle, but ever, with Brew McCoy. So Brew McCoy is a 5-star athlete out of Mater Dei. He was down to USC and Texas. And I think in his head, Brew McCoy always wanted to go to Texas, but in his heart, and for those around him, there was a lot of pressure for him to go to USC, being a Southern Cal guy. And so he picked USC at the All-American Bowl in San Antonio. He signed with USC, and he enrolled and went there for 2 weeks, and just kind of, after Cliff Kingsbury bolted for the NFL, and with so many question marks around Clay Helton and Lynn Swann, you saw Brew McCoy back out of USC and enter the transfer portal, which is a complete different discussion in itself, and end up at Texas before National Signing Day, which is completely wild. You had a 5-star kid, a top 10 national guy, sign with USC and end up at Texas before National Signing Day as a straight transfer, which makes it even more weird. But yeah, that speaks to the dysfunctionality at USC and kind of what Texas has been able to do. So those are 2 programs trending in the complete opposite direction.
And we saw something similar happen to Miami before Mark Richt announced his retirement, where a little bit coming off a bad season for Miami, that was 7-6, for USC that was 5-7. So that's a bad foundation for recruits to say, hey, where is this program right now? The head coach doesn't have a lot of current mojo in both cases, and then some decisions are questioned. And then when you see a couple guys bail, and then it causes the other recruits to think, oh, there must be something wrong. If those guys are bailing, I'm going to bail. And it's almost like the stock market at that point. And interesting stuff with USC and Miami. Manny Diaz obviously righting some wrongs with the transfer portal, the aforementioned transfer portal there with the U. Got EJ Hollen on the line, 24/7 Sports Recruiting. EJ, in regards to, we see different paths, different strategies, different styles from these coaches who are effective recruiters. Urban Meyer and Nick Saban could pretty much go old school, roll out the resume and say, you know, come to Ohio State, come to Alabama, and they're going to bring in a top 3 recruiting class. Dabo Swinney's done it a different way, more of a new school. Hey, we've got a certain culture. We have fun. I'm going to be your buddy. That sort of thing. Are there certain aspects of the recruiting uh, style and approach of coaches that you can kind of latch onto and say, this is what seems to be working? This seems to be a common thread amongst recruiters that seems to be effective?
I think it's just kind of case by case basis. It really has a lot to do with the personality of the head coach. So looking at the region where, I'm at in the state of Texas, you have Jimbo Fisher, who can be kind of that sort of Nick Saban type of guy, resume that can sell a national championship. I'm the only guy here that's won a national championship as a head coach, one of only a few active guys. I think that with Tom Herman, it's more, hey, I'm a younger guy. I've won some really big games. We just beat Georgia. This is the University of Texas. Come and help us continue to rebuild because we won a national championship in your lifetime. Like Texas A&M hasn't won or competed for a conference title since 1998. Texas has competed for a national championship recently. So I think those two kind of butt heads selling that. You have Gary Patterson at TCU that just is a master evaluator. I mean, that guy finds diamonds in the rough and develops them. And that TCU staff does a tremendous job of developing under the radar talent. And they identify guys that can turn into something. And they don't necessarily have this big recruiting pitch. It's more, hey, let's find the right guys that we think have the upside to be developed in our system. You have Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, who's kind of the Dabo Swinney type of guy who's, hey, I'm a young guy. I am an innovative offensive mind. I can, win huge games. We've been in the college football playoff. We've had back-to-back Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. Come play for me. I'm the fun guy. And then you have, Ed Orgeron at LSU, who just is really family oriented, kind of has that funny voice, cool personality, just kind of that father type of guy, or like a fun uncle, more like a fun uncle type of guy. So I think it just depends on the personality of the coaches. Everybody has their own method. I don't think there's one that works over the other. I mean, you could point to Texas, which takes their time really offering kids and doing thorough evaluations. Or you could point to Alabama, who has a top, recruiting class in the country, and they send out offers like crazy, get them to camp because it's Alabama, come to camp, and then they evaluate from there and they kind of trim down their list. But I don't think there is really a right way or a wrong way. It's just dependent on each school.
EJ Hollen, 24/7 Sports. In addition to the obvious, people just jumping online, EJ, and seeing your work there at 24/7 Sports. Any particular venues or platforms where they can find you more easily?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at EJ Hollen 24/7. Obviously, you said 24/7 Sports. I'm on Periscope a lot at EJ Hollen 24/7. So those are definitely the platforms you can find me at. We have some great stuff going on leading up to National Signing Day. I know it's not as crazy as the early period like we talked about, but we still have some interesting storylines that we're following, and we're still trying to provide the best coverage we can. And, a lot of events are starting off for that 2020 cycle, and I think it's going to be a special one in the state of Texas. I think this is some of the best talent we've seen in a while overall.
EJ, we appreciate the information and the insight, sir.
All right. Thanks for having me.